But God's kingdom doesn't have to make sense because it is an upside down kingdom. It is a covenant of grace that we live under, right? God stepped in our place so that we could be set free. And again, as it says, as a result, we are united with Christ. Right? That is the true message of Christmas. And why God even chose, right, to not just come to shepherds, but to come into a lowly, dark, evil, sinful world. To turn it all upside down. We see in Luke chapter 9, verses 23 and 24, again, the words of Jesus is that he said to the crowd, "If any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way, take up your cross daily, and follow me. If you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake, you will save it." Again, it doesn't make sense. Right? If I die to myself, how can I live? But that's exactly what God asks us to do. Because the gospel, again, does not make sense without Christ. Right? The gospel doesn't make sense without God's love and without his grace. And again, just as scripture says, it is foolish to those that don't believe. Because it doesn't make sense. But that's exactly God's plan. Because his kingdom, again, is an upside down kingdom. And that is why we, again, look at the message of Christmas and realize that we have to, again, open the gift of grace that comes through the Christ child. Right? That it can be that simple, right? That we can, through surrendering our hearts, just as Jesus says in this passage, right? To give up my way, to die to myself, right? Which is taking up your cross, right? It means give up your life, right? And then follow Jesus. Right? And then we end up in this paradox. It is, again, we find to be true that if you hang on to your life, right, and hold it tight and try to do it on your own way, you'll end up losing it. But if we give it to Christ and we surrender our hearts to him, right, we will find real life, right? We'll save our lives for eternity. And again, just the fact that the angel chose through God's direction to come to shepherds remind us of this upside down kingdom. And we see, as we continue to work through the story in these next verses, in verses 9 and 10, it says, "Suddenly the angel of the Lord appeared among them, and the radiance of God's glory surrounded them, and they were terrified, but the angel reassured them. 'Don't be afraid,' he said. 'I bring you good news that will bring joy to all people.'" Again, notice in this is where the shepherds truly find themselves in this dilemma, right? Their initial reaction, obviously, to an angel showing up and rocking their world, right, is they're afraid, which is a natural response. Right? And yet here, the angel says, hey, you don't have to be afraid. In fact, you should be joyful instead. Right, because, and again, we see they should be joyful, right? Because true joy is bigger than circumstantial emotions. True joy is way bigger than circumstantial emotions. In fact, joy is actually not an emotion at all. Joy is a state of being. Now, happy